If you're watching this channel, it's because you don't enjoy watching the world squander what Christendom built, but you want to do your part. And chances are you've heard me mention a great means by doing just that. Email made by and for Catholics. Check out fidei.email. That's FIDEI.email. Built for Catholic individuals, families, organizations, and groups. They're private, secure, and of course, they're Catholic. And they're offering 2 months off on your first year for an annual subscription if you enter the coupon code Return to Tradition without spaces. That's the name of this channel, without spaces, at checkout.
Before the events of 2020, one of the things that the critics of the Vatican have reported on pretty consistently is all the weird conferences that they would host with secular authorities, and not just, the authorities of Italy or whatever, but actually like international authorities. The Vatican would host these, frankly, controversial conferences and take really bizarre stands, and it happened 2 or 3 times a year, until the events of 2020, when all of that was put on hold for a while. And it looks like they've begun having them again. We have news of one that's happening right now. Its second day is today. And it's happening at the same time that some propaganda is being displayed at St. Peter's Basilica that definitely coincides with the spirit of what's going on there. This is the Vatican, once again, reasserting that Francis and the Church are fully on the side of the would-be tyrants of the world. So, we go to the story from Headline News, from LifeSite News, which gives us this headline. Vatican meeting on human fraternity seeks answers for the future but is silent on faith. The Vatican event titled Be Human gathers secular leaders, Nobel laureates, and various professionals to discuss proposals for a fraternal planet, drawing from Pope Francis's 2020 encyclical Fratelli Tutti. A fraternal planet is an interesting code for that integrated world the secular forces are trying to build. It's very interesting coded language they're using here. People have largely forgotten about Fratelli Tutti. That document was the product of the Pan-Amazon Synod back in 2019, the same synod that was kicked off by the Pachamama debacle, where we saw actual idolatry take place first in Vatican Gardens and then immediately thereafter in St. Peter's Basilica. And no, we're not talking about the quote-unquote idolatry that Protestants like to accuse Catholics of. No, actual idolatry. Veneration of pagan idols. It was some very weird things, if you recall. It seems like an eternity ago now, 4.5 years later, and the Pachamama topic itself is kind of old hat at this point, but that happened there and completely took the attention off of the Pan-Amazon Synod. Most of the Pan-Amazon Synod was buried in the controversies around that evil display, and to a certain degree, we can understand why. But the outcome of that synod was a document called Fratelli Tutti, which was a big love letter to the secular authorities and their desire for building a more integrated humanity. It took all the green issues you care to name, ramped up the church's rhetoric on all of them to 11, and in hindsight, given what happened in 2020, set the stage for the church to surrender to secular authorities when it came time for people being denied the sacraments, as happened that year. And they did it with really no good reason, again, in hindsight. And the critique you might have, the pushback you might get to commentary like this on this subject is, well, the Catholic Church has a long history going back to at least the 19th century, if not before, of commenting on social issues in the modern world and giving critiques on these things and such. And yes, that's true. But from just before Leo XIII's papacy in the late 19th century until about 1958, that commentary was usually in a sort of a loving opposition kind of way, correcting the whims of the world on all manner of social things, including many ideas that people in the country I'm reporting to you on this from hold dear, and commenting on some of the underlying errors on it, and how to do it in light of the gospel instead, how the gospel should inform everything we do as human beings, including how we organize ourselves and govern ourselves. That's what's missing, and has been missing for decades. In all of this, since the council, the church has increasingly allied itself with a certain segment of the secular world, and that certain segment of the secular world has stood more and more in opposition to the things the church stands for on the world stage. And now we're seeing just blatantly unchristian and un-Catholic things being advocated for now by the Vatican, such as this. So, let's go to that LifeSite article. Quote, The Vatican is partnering with the Fratelli Tutti Foundation to host the second World Meeting on Human Fraternity, which will see secular leaders and Nobel laureates attempt to find answers to build the future. Announced via a press conference May 7th, details of the May 10th to 11th World Meeting on Human Fraternity were revealed principally by Cardinal Archpriest of St. Peter's Basilica, Mauro Gambetti. He spoke of a need to, quote, bring attention to the world of the need for fraternity, expressing his hope that the event would assist people to rediscover aspects such as human dialogue. The experience, says Gambetti, is intended to, quote, renew the charter of humanity. This week's event is titled Be Human and is jointly organized by the Fratelli Tutti Foundation, born out of Pope Francis's 2020 encyclical Fratelli Tutti, and the Vatican. It will draw numerous Nobel Peace Prize laureates to events around Rome and the Vatican. Businessmen, political activists, economist Jeff Sachs, and Nelson Mandela's wife Graca Machel Mandela will also be present. A series of round-table events will take place across the city and in the Holy See, with the Nobel laureates and other ranking participants divided accordingly amongst the various events, which will, quote, once again make proposals for a fraternal planet. The personalities will discuss, quote, how to promote the value of fraternity among people at a time when war and fear dominate our days. As noted by the Fratelli Tutti Foundation, quote, personalities from around the world, Nobel laureates, scientists, artists, professors, mayors, doctors, managers, workers, sports champions will try to find answers. Such answers, quote, may be different, they may not be unequivocal, but they will be the building blocks of the future, stated the foundation, end quote. This is, by the way, the logical outcome of all the ecumenical dialogue we've seen. After all, if the Vatican is willing to talk to non-Catholic religious leaders about all of our common things we have and how we should not really focus too much on this seeking the truth, but instead just group hug and kumbaya, then why not bring in the secular authorities who are overtly non-believers and engage in that sort of kumbaya-seeking meetings that they seem to have? This is just the logical outcome of all that ecumenical dialogue. Now, given that you're watching this on the Saturday that is the second day of the event, I hope to have Francis's reflection as part of what I talk about tomorrow morning on Sunday in my live stream, or maybe Monday morning. It depends, because I actually have something from Cardinal Burke planned for you for tomorrow, so we'll see how that goes. And my Sunday live streams tend to be pretty low-key because it's Sunday, right? But for those thinking that Francis had given up selling the church out to the secular authorities, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but no, he hasn't. Prior to 2020 and those events, once or twice a year, the Vatican would host United Nations conferences on subjects that are, quite frankly, obviously at odds with the Church's social and moral teaching, including on issues related to population and the like, with Vatican representatives almost always siding with secular authorities on those issues, and when they do oppose some of the things they're saying, it's always in the softest, most mealy-mouthed terms possible, delivered in such a way as to make it clear that they're still on board the broader program, they just have a couple moral qualms about things. It's all really nauseating when you watch it. That, of course, all took a pause from 2023 to 2022, or from 2020 to 2022 or 2023, but is now picked up again where it all left off. Now, I'd be surprised if there wasn't another meeting like this in the Vatican before the end of the year, because this is kind of a big year on the international stage when it comes to geopolitical issues, including local elections and things, local meaning national, all across the Western world right now. Looking at you, America, Canada, looks like the UK, all of which is going to be significant for this stuff moving forward. Coinciding with this conference, by the way, is a photo exhibit at St. Peter's Basilica about all things green related to what we have to call around here the thermometer problem, due to our totally fair and totally free host biased rules about such things. The placing of this display during the conference on worldwide human fraternity is absolutely not a coincidence, meaning that thermometer issue will be front and center during these discussions. L'Osservatore Romano, the official Jesuit publication of the Vatican, had this to say about it, quote, changes, an exhibition on the thermometer problem, will be on display from May 7th to the 27th in one of the colonnades of St. Peter's Square during the month of Mary. How convenient. Organized by the Dicastery for Communication in conjunction with the Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development and the Centro di Alta Formazione Laudato Si, the exhibition features 24 photographs and the words of St. Francis of Assisi's Canticle of the Sun. The exhibition is part of a broader initiative, Emotions to Generate Change. End quote. Ah yes, emotions to generate change. Yeah, the Vatican is asking you to have an emotional response to a rather dubious social, scientific, and political issue that they are putting the church on the side of would-be tyrants with. Such is the textbook method of propaganda, by the way. Short-circuit your reason with emotional thinking. This is sort of dictatorial stuff 101. It really is. To give you an idea of what that display looks like, here's how the Emotions for Change website describes what they're doing. Quote, "The words of St. Francis create a photographic journey through the contrast between the effects of the thermometer problem on the one hand and the hope given by the emotions generated by God's creation on the other." End quote. All right, so these people turned St. Francis of Assisi into the patron saint of creation and their suspect green causes. St. Francis of Assisi really never had anything to do with that stuff. Yeah, he has a canticle of creation. Great. But they did it mostly by misappropriating that and his famous preaching to the birds and trees by completely missing the point of it. St. Francis preached to the birds and trees to shame the people who he was preaching to because they were ignoring the gospel. So he shamed them. That's what he did. St. Francis was a preacher who, by the way, never ever said that famous phrase that's for some reason attributed to him. Preach the gospel at all times, if necessary, use words. He never said that. In fact, that is diametrically opposed to everything he stood for. He was the founder of an order of preaching monks. Why would he say something like that? He preached at all times with words. He was always verbally preaching the gospel. Always. And you won't find the gospel in this display at the Vatican or in the conference happening right now. Over there, that's for certain. How do I know this? Because I've covered enough of these conferences to know. This is the Vatican, at best, putting a spiritual spin on some very dubious causes. And this isn't going to stop when Francis is gone unless you get some radical outcome to the next conclave, whenever that happens. Not that I'm saying one's happening anytime soon. What do you think about this? Are you surprised in the slightest that Francis is doing this? You shouldn't be. This is part and parcel of just how things have been going since 2013 and frankly since before, because these kind of conferences, these kind of meetings, and this kind of alliance with the secular world goes back to the 70s and frankly to the 60s when Pope Paul VI laid down the papal tiara, the crown of the popes, and essentially in that act surrendered the church's secular authority. What do you think of this? Let me know in the comments, please. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't. It does help. So to sharing this on social media, that helps too. If you've ever thought about becoming a patron or channel member of Return to Tradition, now's a great time to support the work of the channel. It does help keep these daily messages coming. And a big thank you to the patrons and channel members who do support this work. As always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.